So I'm speaking with Keith Strohm, who is going to be joining us in February at the One Conference to talk about forming intentional disciples. And if you haven't heard that phrase, it derives from this book by Sherry Waddell, whom I had the chance to interview in Denver in October. You can find that on our diocesan YouTube channel. And Keith is one of her team members who goes around the world speaking about what this is all about. So Keith, tell us, what is forming intentional disciples and how did you get involved?
Sure. Forming intentional disciples is really about helping people form a personal relationship with Christ in the midst of His church. And it's aimed at not just people who are coming to Mass or involved at the parish, but pastoral leaders at all levels to help other people encounter Jesus.
Okay. Now, Keith, one of the striking things in that book, it's in the introduction, I believe, is this dialogue that Sherry had years ago with a high-level woman leader in a Catholic organization, actually in our country, in Canada, as you know. And can you just relay that story that I think was significant in the history of this book and what the work that you do? Tell us that story.
Sure. Yeah, Sherry was doing this interview. It was a gifts discernment interview for helping people discern their spiritual gifts. And as the conversation moved forward, Sherry was just asking the question, can you tell me about your lived relationship with Jesus? And this woman, after thinking a while, couldn't actually answer the question and eventually said, well, I don't have one. And Sherry was puzzled. She's a convert, and so she just thought, well, maybe I'm not asking the right question. So she spent a good portion of that interview asking the same question multiple ways to try and elicit the response she was sure was there. And finally, she says after the course of that conversation, she realized she had to take this woman at her word that she didn't have a personal relationship with God. And in fact, that really spurred the Catherine of Siena Institute and Sherry in particular on a quest to help people connect with Jesus.
Wow. And that's, as Sherry points out, it's not a Protestant concept. That's something that every follower of Jesus Christ, which includes obviously Catholics, is called to. Sometimes the terminology trips us up because it might be a little bit new, but it's not foreign to the Catholic Church's mind or language, right?
Absolutely, that's correct. In fact, one of the things I like to tell people as I'm traveling the country or the world is, do you think St. Paul cared about people's personal relationship with Jesus? And oftentimes they'll just say yes. And I say, well, last time I checked, St. Paul wasn't a Protestant. He was part of the Apostolic Church, the Catholic Church. And so,
Right.
It's fundamentally woven into who we are. Jesus Christ says to go out and make disciples of all nations.
Right.
Like disciples are men and women who have a relationship with Christ
Right.
in the midst of His church. And that's what we're called to do.
Right. And I think also for those that might get caught up in the language, what do we mean by that? Intentional following of Jesus, just like those He called to leave their nets and follow Him, right? It's not complicated. And we use different terminology in the Catholic world that really, I think, means the same thing, like intimacy with Christ, union with Christ, following Christ. But the point is that it's chosen deliberately, and it's giving of yourself, right? It's not just because of the routine or your sacramental markers in your life or what you do at church. It's a decision you make that He calls us all to make.
That's exactly right. Yes, it's not accidental. Discipleship isn't accidental. Sherry likes to say weeds are accidental. They'll grow up. But discipleship is part of a journey.
Right.
And at some part of that journey, as we are moving toward God, we make a decision. We say, yes, Lord, I want to follow You, and I want to follow You in the midst of Your church, and I want to follow You and give myself to You, even if I don't know exactly everything that might mean.
Okay.
And what we need to do I think in parishes in particular is help people come to that decision.
Okay. Now, Keith, this book, I understand, it's caused a welcome shockwave in the Catholic Church, I think in the West. And I'm not sure if it's been translated into other languages yet. I'm sure it will be. But it's really effectively woken us up to, frankly, how many of our good Catholic people that are in our pews haven't had this conscious decision, haven't decided, first of all, don't have the clarity fully of what Jesus' invitation is, and second, haven't had an opportunity, a meaningful one, to respond to it. So tell us about your talk on forming intentional disciples in February. You have about an hour. What are you going to do, and why should people come?
Well, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to examine a little bit more what it means to be an intentional disciple. I think that's going to be an important key piece, and how to help recognize where people might be in their spiritual journey so that we can make that invitation. I think the other piece is to help people be confident. I think Catholics have, in particular, a bit of a complex in that they don't feel like they can, that they're worthy lay Catholics, that they can go out and introduce people to Jesus just through their living their lives and also sharing their faith verbally, but to know that we are called and we're equipped, and you don't need a master's degree in theology. And so the goal here is to help people really become more comfortable with that process. And it's really a beautiful process. It's encountering people and helping them encounter the Lord who loves them.
Wonderful. We're really looking forward to having you. I've found in my reading of the book and hearing your members of your team talk that the content is fascinating, it's deeply moving, challenging, and practical, so it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming, and we look forward to having you in February.
Thank you so much.